Welcome back, everybody, to the Overwatch League Report. I'm your host, Timur, filling in for Brian. Unfortunately, couldn't make it this time again. He's still in Mexico, harnessing his Tijuana Tigres, this unknown team, which we haven't really seen much from, but he promises is killing it in scrims. But as usual, I am joined by Ben.
Yeah, very glad to join you. I was very happy with this week overall. I think we're going in the right direction here.
Definitely. The week as a whole, I would say a lot of lower tier teams came out ahead, which to me was a big surprise. Let's talk about Florida Mayhem, who, in my mind, are probably the worst team in the league. If you look at the numbers, that's definitely the case. And yet they were able to best the Outlaws, who a lot of people had them. This was like an easy match for them. They were going to go straight through this stage without any losses, and yet they were bested by Mayhem.
Yeah, I think a lot of their success in this match comes down to them, not committing themselves to playing goats and flexing a little bit. I think that, a lot of teams this week played more DPS style compositions. Some people are speculating that it's only because the teams are bored with goats. I think it's probably more to do with just the fact that the teams are realizing that they're not good at goats and that they don't have the time at this point in the season to become comparable goats team to some of these top teams like Vancouver and the Shock and even New York, who've shown an ability to flex here onto Sombra goats, which has become pretty popular as well. So what do you think of the Mayhem's little comeback into the scene here?
Yeah, I was really surprised. I really did think the Outlaws had this, locked down. But I mean, Saya played really well. Yeah. There was a few players on the team that just showed up this time around, and they honestly crushed it, especially on Hollywood, maps like that where they looked so strong, and it was really shocking to see them be so dominant. And just to add to your point, yeah, I think you're right about that. Like a lot of teams, you got to give them credit for, not every team can be Titans, not every team can be San Francisco Shock, but they can't just give up and be like, oh, because it's goats, we're just gonna play the rest of the season and be done, not win. Everyone wants to, go to the finals. Everyone wants to go to the stage finals, and not playing goats is valid, as we've seen this week. You look at LA Valiant, for example, who had a really strong week, and in stage one we're at the very bottom without any wins, and yet they were able to beat Titans and ruin their perfect record.
Yeah, no, they went 2-0 this week. They 3-1 the Dragons earlier in the week in a very dominant fashion, and they 3-1 the Titans at the final match to end this, crazy day and a crazy week. And it wasn't even a particularly close 3-1. The closest map was the one that Vancouver won, where both of those they won the control map 2-0, but both of those points were they were easily winnable by the Valiant. It could have gone either way. And on the other three maps, the Valiant were just so dominant, which is very surprising. I mean, the Valiant this week have really committed to putting Shax in the lineup over space, so they can run the Stoneberg Goat setup, similar to how New York has kind of subbed out Meko in favor of Stableby. And it's worked out pretty well. I mean, Shax is crazy on Sombra, and he has a lot of flexibility if they want to run these other bizarre compositions. Fact Fiction has really come into his own and has shown that he deserves his spot back in the Overwatch League. He was in the league last year, and then he dropped down to contenders, and now he's back and he's leading the Valiant to great success.
Yeah, and I just want to you mentioned Shax, and I just want to cover him really briefly because I didn't know who he was until this weekend. I mean, I feel like he's kind of a new face, but it seems to be really working. And you have to give it credit as well to the coaches for putting him in over a strong player and taking that risk. And not only that, but it felt like they did their homework. Shax would be like destroying translocators, like during the game, and yeah, he played a better Sombra, and that was really what I think won them that, especially the Titans game.
I don't think Summon Su really had ever played a ton of Sombra like professionally. I think that I believe Haxel is mostly the player that would play Sombra in those compositions back when they were Runaway. But I mean, Summon Su was one of the newer faces for that organization. So I mean, it is. I think there are still some growing pains for the Titans to try and run Sombra Goats, as we've clearly saw. And I think that when their opponents are kind of forcing them to do this weird stuff and play these DPS comps, I think that there's a little bit of a stubbornness with the Titans because they have so much confidence in themselves on the GOATS composition that they think that they can beat teams that are kind of trying to cheese them a little bit. So we'll kind of see if they can adapt going forward. But yeah, it didn't look like they were particularly adaptable in this particular match.
Yeah, exactly. And as we were texting last night, it's kind of it gives you the impression that they're actually human and they can be defeated. And in my mind, this opens it up for other teams to, we see that weakness now, and they, this is basically the first time we saw them, get so dominated. And I think even just having that in other teams' mind, it'll open up, more possibilities. And as far as LA Valiant, I just want to tack on a little "I told you so" with Kareev, where fucking star player, man. I don't know why they didn't put him in sooner.
Yeah, I know you've been very down on Izayaki since for like the most of the season. Even like every time that they completely shit the bed for the first 3 maps, and they like in stage 2 would throw in Kareev on Junkertown or whatever, and they would just like roll that map. You'd be like, why aren't they playing anymore? What are they doing? I think a lot of it is because there is a shift right now to a lot more Ana play in that flex support role over Zenyatta. I think it's like maybe 60-40 now, or in stage 1, the start of stage 2, it was like 90% Zenyatta. Right. And I think that Kareev is a stronger Ana. And as we saw, like his like sleep dart numbers were,
oh my god,
unreal. Like it's become a meme at this point, the like Kareev sleep. So like it's like I think I was definitely a defender of Izayaki in the start, and I think that it's an argument that could be made of whether they should have made this swap earlier. I think that it becomes a lot clearer with the way the meta is now, with Ana being a lot more prevalent.
Definitely. Yeah, I loved that sleep that he got on Haxel, who switched to Pharah, and I was like, oh no, Haxel. Like, you just don't associate him as a Pharah player, and to me, it felt like the kind of change where it was like, I felt like Titans were getting a bit aggravated. It's like, we should be winning. I'm just going to go to Pharah, and then we'll destroy them. But it's like, no, that's not what you've been practicing. It seemed, at least for me, and then he just gets slept, and it was like so dirty. But I want to jump to another team and another player who I've mentioned before, who I wanted them to put in, and he's back, which is Aim God, who's back on Boston. And wow, their game against Paris was just insane. They pulled off the the sweep yet again, the reverse sweep, I should say.
Yeah, this is their 4th reverse sweep of the season. They've now set the record, and we're not even 3/4 of the way through the season at this point, so it could be even more reverse sweeps in the future. Hopefully not, just for my heart's sake.
Yeah.
But yeah, they finally, for the first time this stage, got back to their like classic lineup, their support line of Amgon and Calyx. I'm sure Persia and Elamau are great guys, but they just haven't been performing to the same level. And we kind of saw that in this match where both Imgod and Kellex were playing completely out of their minds. Maybe because now they know that there's like some more pressure on them to perform because there are these other players on the bench, ready to chomping at the bit, ready to take their place. But yeah, the first half wasn't great for them. But coming back, starting on Eichenwald, where they had this insane 1 minute plus stall on the last point, where they're just throwing heroes out left and right, and the Eternal are just running around trying to figure out which way is up. And there was a time where there was a tracer at 30 health zooping around the point, and if they just killed the tracer, then the match would have been over because they capped in overtime, so they had to stall the Eternal until the time bank was less than a minute, and they did, and then they won in the extra rounds even though they were 45-50 seconds behind.
Yeah.
Again, another crazy stall at the choke right after point A. So I mean, there were just multiple moments in that match where there were just really clutch holds and crazy brawly team fights that went on for way too long. And then maps 4 and 5, I think that Boston really kind of came back and actually played pretty solidly. So yeah, I'm very happy that they've stopped experimenting. They're doing the good experimenting, which is putting Blase on Doomfist, where he's classically been he's known for being an incredibly strong Doomfist player. They're not saying, oh, we're going to take this person we just picked up and just throw them in the lineup, and we're going to swap Blase and color hex on their rolls randomly and get totally rolled. I think they've gotten to the point where I think they've realized which experimentation is working and which isn't, and they're more focused in their game plan. So hopefully that continues going forward.
Oh, definitely. And I think Blase, especially this week, was just he played so strong, and you could tell from their replays, and that sometimes they'll show what the players are saying to each other. He was taking on a little bit more of a leader role. And obviously Fusions is the real, everyone kind of knows him as Boston's real strong leader, but it seems that role is kind of being shared between them now. And there was even a moment where you could see Fusions sort of being good call, after they won a round or whatever, he's good call, Blase. I think most of Blase's calls were just hey, everyone calm the fuck down, we got this, stop yelling. Yeah, what do you think of that dynamic?
Yeah, I mean, he said in his interview after, it was the most important thing during those hectic fights that were lasting, a minute plus, was just making sure everybody didn't lose their heads and throw. So I mean, it's obviously they did something that worked because they kept on doing these crazy holds and ended up winning these drawn out rally team fights. So, yeah, it was good. I'm glad that they finally got a win this stage, and hopefully they can win again next week.
Yeah, same. Okay, so let me just bookend that by saying Paris did not do well this week, which was really sad to see. But like I mentioned earlier, a lot of teams that we consider in the lower bracket are actually did quite well. And one being Washington Justice against London, who, I mean, London has been playing, kind of not terribly well lately, but this game with Washington was just so close. It was really I at moments I was oh man, Washington's just gonna take it.
Yeah, no, I mentioned earlier with Sansam and Corey, I think that them kind of moving them to different heroes that they're more comfortable on, and moving away from this kind of GOAT setup is really paying off. And they're definitely one of the teams that is, even though they didn't win their match, it was close and they looked better, which is definitely a step in the right direction, especially against a strong team like London. So I think that like obviously, there are still issues. There was the C9 on Paris, I think, right?
Right.
That was not great. But they there's definitely they definitely look like they're playing better overall. I think a lot of that definitely has to do with them not playing goats because they're so bad at goats, and I think they realize at this point they're bad at goats and they can't just consistently play it because they're not gonna beat these top teams.
Right. Well, I guess that's sort of the big question with that match is Washington Justice getting a lot better, or is London getting worse? And I do think it's the former, because if you look at the other London match this week, they played NYXL, and that was actually a pretty close game. NYXL is obviously one of the top three teams in the league.
No, yeah, I think that London is definitely still a strong team. They have consistency issues, of course. I mean, looking at towards the end of stage 2, there were a couple of matches where they just were not performing to their ability, and they were just making a lot of really bad mistakes. But coming into this stage, they have a new main support in Quatermain, who has seen a lot of play over Nuss. I think a lot of the idea here is that Quatermain is known as a much stronger Lucio, and kind of Nuss, was like a star in the end of season 1, mostly surrounding his Mercy play. And so I think that they kind of have this this dual setup now, where as long as Lucio is the primary main support hero we're going to be seeing, then I think they're going to start Quatermain. And he has definitely performed up to scratch with the rest of this team, who are, people forget they are the defending champs.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, what do you think of London's chances? I know you said that you still think they're strong.
I do still think they're a very strong team. It's really the meta, because so earlier last week I watched an old game. I think it might have been stage 2 final or something like that, but it was NYXL versus London, and it was so entertaining. I mean, that's just like, a comment about goats, but other than that, it was just, you saw these two top tier teams, widow duels, the whole shebang. It was just so like gripping. And yeah, I mean, I think London still is that team. They're on par with NYXL. It's just, the meta shifts, and they're not as good as other teams at goats. But yeah, I encourage people to go back. If you're ever losing hope with Overwatch League, and you're like, I'm sick of this, I'm tired of goats, like, go back and watch those types of games from season 1. They're so entertaining, they're so fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, people are sick of goats, but I think that this week really showed that there is kind of a future with that. We saw maybe
that's true.
60% goats. I think a lot of teams were really leaning, especially on like first point of assault, or first point of hybrid, or some of these other maps, especially some of these like long sightline maps like Havana. We're seeing a lot of more bunker setups, or these double sniper comps, or these like pharmacy ball comps. Like there's definitely a lot of if the meta that we saw demonstrated in this week was what we'd seen throughout the entire season, I don't think that people would be complaining about goats. I think the reason people are still complaining about goats is because it is still probably the most common composition that is played, maybe like 60% at this point from this week, and it is still like there is still like that aspect of like the PTSD of us only seeing goats heroes on every single map 24/7. And
Yeah.
yeah, there are some people who are exhibiting symptoms of Stockholm syndrome and saying that actually goats is really interesting and entertaining. And while in a vacuum goats is interesting and entertaining, it's not interesting and entertaining to only see goats.
That's a really good point. And I feel like you're totally right about this week being kind of a, a step in a new direction. And what I noticed a lot was these Sombra versus Sombra battles between the two teams. And I feel like that's a good segue into the Atlanta Reign, who Dako was on Sombra, and he even though they didn't win, they still I feel like he played really really well on Sombra.
Yeah, I mean he's like a strong player overall. It's not super surprising that he has that flexibility, I guess. But I
Mm.
mean, I think that I'm trying to think if there was even a single team that didn't play at least a little bit of Sombra. I don't think Shock played a ton. I think that
Mm.
they are as a team very anti Sombra.
Yeah.
They played a couple of other like I mean I think that I think Rascal played a little bit and Sinatra played a little bit here and there, but
Yeah.
I do think almost every single team played some form of Sombra Goats
Mm.
this week. Um, and we did see, from the Dallas Fuel, for instance, they had, done this kind of experiment with putting Note on Sombra. It
Mm-hmm.
seems like they are back to putting AKM on Sombra and having Note flex to the Zarya, which I think is a lot better. Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like Diva, even without the Diva nerf being live on the Overwatch League patch, because they're playing on a past patch, they're not playing on the live patch right now. It
Mm-hmm.
does seem like people maybe like are reflexively preparing for Diva the Diva nerf to be live by
Mm.
not playing as much. But yeah, I mean, we'll kind of see where it goes from here. It's very difficult to like say from an isolated circumstance, like whether this week is like a fluke or whether we'll continue down this path going forward.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned Dallas Fuel. I want to talk about that match with Chengdu versus Dallas, and Chengdu coming way out ahead. It seemed. I mean, maybe you can blame this on the Fuels like scheduling, where they had to fight Titans, then Hunters, then Titans. They have to fight Titans again. Um, Maybe that's like why they lost so bad. They were just not prepared. What do you think?
Um, yeah, the Fuel are very interesting to me because I think they have a lot of talent and they have a lot of capability. Um, I'm not actually super sure kind of went wrong with them. I think a lot of their issues might be similar to what we're seeing from Boston, where they're just kind of all playing like slightly sloppy, and in this meta, especially when you're playing goats v goats, like playing sloppy is like if you play slightly sloppier than your opponent, you're going to get totally destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
And Chengdu has shown like they're obviously known because Ameng is still their
Mm-hmm.
primary main tank, and this week I believe he played almost exclusively. I think I'm not sure if I think Sharon might have played one or two maps against the Titans. I have to
Mm.
double check that, but I think that Ameng played all four maps against the Fuel, and he has been showing a lot more strength on at the very least Winston,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of has somewhat similar mechanics to Ball. So it kind of makes sense that if he's not going to be performing as well on Ryan, that he could be performing well on Winston. And the reason we are seeing more Winston goats this week is because of the DPS comps, and Winston is a lot better at countering DPS heroes than Ryan is because of the mobility.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think that the hunters have just kind of like coalesced into a much stronger unit, and the Dallas Fuel were kind of going in the opposite direction.
Yeah, unfortunately. And something that just came to mind for me was Mickey, who we haven't seen in a while. Maybe we can just talk very briefly about that because I feel like he was like the strongest Brigida player for a while. And with the meta being pretty, heavy on Brigida, well, haven't we seen Mickey?
I mean, there might be like some personal reasons. I don't know.
Maybe.
Somebody we did see though was we saw Harry Hook
True, true.
starting over Unko, which was
Yeah.
interesting. It was an interesting decision. I mean, Harry Hook performed fine.
Hmm.
He didn't. He wasn't like a star or anything, but he
Hmm.
performed fine given their them kind of not performing well as a team overall.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely there's definitely a case to be made for Mickey if he's feeling up to it. Something else we talked about with the fuel is OG kind of stepping away and then replacing him with their new, I guess, backup. Backup's probably not a good term to use at this point because he started both matches this week, but their new main tank Trill
Yeah.
has been kind of leading their team now, and so I wouldn't want to put a lot of the blame on him because obviously he's a new player. He's new on the Overwatch League stage. I don't think he looked particularly off in the Chengdu match. I think he was. There might have been some nerves going into the Spark match that showed.
Hmm.
But there's definitely a sense of them kind of making these swaps and trying some new things because they feel like what they were doing wasn't working. But yeah, I mean, I'm not super sold on Trill and Harry Hook over OG
Yeah.
and Unko at this point. But we'll see.
I tend to agree with you there. And as far as moving forward, I'm rooting for the other Texas team personally, and yeah, I they're looking, even though they lost to Florida, they're looking quite a bit stronger. So yeah, I guess let's talk about the moving forward, what we're going to see next week. Any matches that spark your interest?
Yeah, I think that coming off of this loss, seeing the Vancouver's last match of the stage against the Gladiators, who are a pretty consistently strong team at this point, will be very interesting. Also, the Outlaws might be able to get a little bit of a bounce back here because if they lose back to back against the Mayhem and then against the Justice, I think we can put this comeback kid story to rest.
Definitely.
Um, there's also the Shock versus the Spitfire towards the end of the week, and
Yep.
Valiant coming off of two strong match wins against top tier, like maybe second tier teams. They're going into two rough matches right at the start of the week against the
Yeah.
Spark and the Spitfire. So we'll see if they can continue their kind of rise to glory at this point. And there are a number of these like underdog teams that are kind of making a run for those playoff spots, and it'll be interesting to see which one of these teams actually end up succeeding in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the Uprising versus Fusion rematch,
Mm-hmm.
and that match it wasn't super like the second half of the match was a bit blowouty, but the match overall was relatively close, at least on paper. And
Mm.
with Boston coming off of their first win in a while, and the Fusion kind of looking a little bit hit or miss,
Mm.
seeing that rematch could be pretty interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to look at the standings really quick, just so we can sort of gauge which teams are really, you know, they are cutting it close as far as these next few matches where they will stand. For example, Philly. I mean, if they lose this match to Boston, they're gonna go down pretty far, and I mean, if Boston wins, they're going to go up. So it's this sort of it's we're getting to these matches that are really going to determine, I think, especially for these mid tier teams, where they really fall. Um, yeah, as well as Atlanta, who I thought were looking really strong, but this stage just have not pulled out any wins. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of that is just their schedule. I think they had a really rough schedule, and they did play the Fusion very close this week. That was one of the more exciting matches of the week of a week that was full of exciting matches.
Mm.
So I think they just kind of got very unlucky. A lot of the top teams they were playing, but yeah, they definitely will look to bounce back on their home turf against the likes of Toronto and Florida in Week 5. So
yeah,
hopefully they'll be able to beat these lower tier teams at home. Probably a little bit intentional for the league designers to put the easier matchups for Atlanta on their home matches, so they can kind of flex a little bit to their fans.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're right. And the other thing that I'm looking forward to is Bren versus Defran. I guess a Widow 1v1 duel. That should be really interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, this is like kind of Bren like did fairly okay against what's his name? Gesture in his 1v1 Widow duel. So I mean, it should be interesting to see, at least with Defran, who I don't associate as a Widow player. So maybe he'll fare better.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, Gesture is a main tank, and he did still totally destroy Bren. I mean, Bren did. Yeah, I think he got 2.
Yeah, I got 2.
7-2, I think it was. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty impressive against a pro player, even though a pro player who is not a DPS player.
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, we'll see. That should be fun. The Fuel homestand was a lot of fun. I'm anticipating this one to be pretty crazy, and for the home fans to really bring it and show everybody how hard Atlanta can party, I guess.
Yeah.
And they are very much with season 3 on the horizon. They are very much a little bit of a preview for what we might expect next season. So
yeah, exactly. All right. Well, with that, I mean, the future is looking exciting, I think. I think that wraps it up for us on this episode of the Overwatch League Report. So make sure to follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, subscribe on YouTube, obviously, and give a thumbs up to the video if you're so inclined. What else? Follow Ben on Twitter at Ben Sharon. Anything else?
No, just hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Tell me in the comments why I'm wrong and why I should stop commenting on the league and everything. Yeah. I always look forward to those.
We're always looking for comments to demean us, so please do leave those comments. All right, well, until next time, thanks for watching, and have a good week. See you guys.